The crystalline spires of Nexus Prime pierced the nebula-painted sky like jagged teeth, each one housing the sovereign representatives of 9 galactic civilizations. Today, they would witness something unprecedented, a human claiming the ancient right of dominion. Kale Vorthik adjusted the neural interface behind his left ear, the only piece of technology he'd been permitted to bring into the arena. The rest was flesh, bone, and a peculiar human capacity for violence that had made his species the galaxy's most feared. Mercenaries around him. The amphitheater's bioluminescent walls pulsed with the excited chatter of 1 billion spectators. Across 9 star systems. You understand the terms, Vorthik of Earth. The arbitrator's voice resonated through quantum harmonics that made his bones ache. The ancient machine entity hovered above the arena's center, its form shifting between dimensions. 9 trials. 9 champions. Victory grants you dominion over their worlds. Defeat means extinction for your species. Kale nodded, studying the champions arrayed before him. The Kragith Empire's representative stood 12 feet tall, its exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial scarification. That told the story of 1,000 conquered worlds. The Void Dancer's champion flickered in and out of visible spectrum, a living shadow that had never known defeat. The others were equally formidable, the Hegemony's bio-enhanced super soldier, the Collective's hive mind avatar, the Solaran's energy being, the Deep Watch's gravity manipulator, the Nethercourt's reality bender, the Axion's living weapon, and the Convergence's digital ghost. Each one could theoretically end human civilization with a thought. The crowd's roar died to whispers as Kale stepped forward. He'd volunteered for this not because humanity needed 9 worlds, but because they needed something more precious, respect. For 3 centuries, humans had been the galaxy's hired killers, taking contracts to dirty for civilized species. They were useful, but never equal, feared, but never respected. That ended today. The right of dominion was ancient law, predating most current civilizations. Any species could claim it, challenge the ruling powers, and win themselves a seat among the galaxy's elite. None had tried in 6,000 years, because the penalty for failure was absolute, the complete sterilization of the challengers. Homeworld and all colonies. Earth's population was 43 billion. The colonies added another 60 billion. 103 billion lives resting on Kel's shoulders. The first trial begins now. The arbitrator announced. Choose your opponent, human. The crowd leaned forward. Traditional strategy demanded starting with the weakest champion, building momentum. Kale had studied every recording, every battle analysis. He knew exactly who that would be. Instead, he pointed at the Kragith champion. A collective gasp echoed. Through the arena, the Kragith were the most militaristic species in the galaxy. Their champion undefeated in over 2 centuries. Starting with them was suicide. General Morthic, for that was the creature's name, let out a sound somewhere between laughter and the death rattle of a dying sun. Bold, monkey, I will make your death memorable. The arena floor shifted, nanomachines, constructing a maze of twisted metal and broken starships, the graveyard configuration. Designed to showcase the Kragith's superiority in close combat, weapon racks rose from the floor, displaying implements of destruction from across the galaxy. Kale ignored them all, walking empty-handed into the maze. The crowd fell silent. Even the arbitrator paused, perhaps running probability calculations on humanity's impending extinction. You mock me with your emptiness, Morthic growled, selecting a plasma-etched warglive that could cleave through starship hulls. No, Kale replied quietly, his voice somehow carrying to every corner of the massive amphitheater. I'm showing you what humans do when everything we love is at stake. He smiled then, and for the first time in their proud history, the Kragith champion felt something it had never experienced before. Fear. The trial horn sounded, and the hunt began. Morthic struck without ceremony, the warglive screaming through air thick with ozone and anticipation. The weapon's plasma edge left a glowing trail as it swept toward Kel's head, a blow that would have decapitated most beings before they could blink. Kale wasn't there. The human had dropped, rolled, and come up inside Morthic's guard before the Kragith's neural processors could adjust. Kel's fist connected with the junction where the alien's primary arm met his thorax. Not hard enough to damage the chitin, but precise enough to trigger a nerve cluster that sent numbing fire down Morthic's weapon arm. The warglive wavered. For half a second, Kale was already moving. The arena's maze provided perfect cover for hit-and-run tactics, but Kale didn't run. He stayed close, weaving between Morthic's increasingly frantic strikes with the fluid grace of a species that had spent millions of years learning to kill things bigger and stronger than themselves. Stand still and die with honor, Morthic roared, frustration bleeding through his translator. Honors for species that can afford it, Kale replied, ducking under another plasma swing and driving his elbow into the soft tissue behind Morthic's knee joint. The Kragith stumbled, caught himself, and spun with the glaive extended to whirling death dance that should have turned the human into component atoms. Instead, Kale dove over the weapon, caught himself on Morthic's shoulder, and used the alien's own momentum to drive both knees into the base of his skull. Morthic crashed face first into the arena floor, his exoskeleton cracking against twisted metal. He rolled, swept the glaive in a desperate arc, but struck only air. Kale had bounded off him and was already 20 feet away, breathing hard but smiling. You fight like a scavenger, Morthic spat, yellowish blood seeping from cracks in his shell. I fight like a human, Kale corrected. We're not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but we're the best at turning disadvantage into weapon. The Kragith champion charged, abandoning technique for raw fury, the war glaive carved glowing lines through the air as Morthic pressed his attack, driving Kale back through the maze. To the watching crowd, it looked like the human was finally being overwhelmed. They were wrong. Kale was mapping every strike, cataloging every tell, learning the rhythm of Morthic's combat style. When the Kragith committed to a particularly vicious overhead strike, Kale stepped inside the blow, caught the weapon's half just below the plasma edge, and twisted. The war glaive's failsafes designed to prevent accidental discharge couldn't distinguish between intentional release and sudden angular stress. The plasma edge died with an electronic whine. Morthic stared at his suddenly mundane weapon for one crucial heartbeat. Kale broke his wrist with surgical precision, plucked the glaive from nerveless fingers, and reversed it in one fluid motion. The blunt end smashed into Morthic's compound eyes. With the full force of human desperation behind it, the Kragith champion went down hard, his exoskeleton spider webbing against the arena floor. He tried to rise, managed to get one leg under him, then collapsed as his nervous system finally registered the full extent of his injuries. Silence filled the arena like a held breath. Yield, Kale said quietly, standing over his fallen opponent with the war glaive held like a club. Your people have honor. Die with it, or live to fight another day. Morthic's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter or pain. I yield. The human fights well. The crowd exploded. In the royal boxes, 9 civilizations' representatives leaned forward with new interest. The arbitrator's mechanical voice cut through the noise like a blade. First trial to the human. Choose your next opponent. Kale looked up at the remaining 8 champions. The void dancer flickered with what might have been amusement. The bio-enhanced super soldier was already calculating new tactical parameters. The others simply watched, their alien features unreadable. The hegemony, Kale announced, pointing at the 9-foot mountain of genetically perfect muscle and military enhancement. Let's see what happens when someone builds the perfect soldier, Colonel. Vex Prima stepped forward, his movements carrying the mechanical precision of someone whose reflexes had been tuned beyond human limits. Unlike Morthic's emotional fury, this one radiated cold professional competence. I have studied your species extensively, Vex Prima said, his voice devoid of inflection. Your victory over the Kragith was adequate. I will not make the same errors. The arena floor shifted again, becoming a perfect sphere with gravity generators creating multiple fighting surfaces. Combat could occur on any plane, at any angle. It was designed to showcase the hegemony's 3-dimensional tactical superiority. Kale cracked his knuckles and grinned. You studied us wrong, Colonel. We're not just good at killing. We're good at learning. The horn sounded for the second trial. Vex Prima moved like liquid death, his enhanced physiology allowing him to fight on any surface of the spherical arena, as if it were solid ground. He'd selected twin plasma rifles military grade, rapid fire, with enough stopping power to punch through tank armor. The hegemony had built him to be the ultimate soldier, and he fought with mechanical perfection. Kale dodged the opening barrage by throwing himself off the arena's primary surface and onto one of the curved walls, using the variable gravity to his advantage. Plasma bolts scorched the air where he'd been standing, leaving molten craters in the nano-constructed metal. Predictable, Vex Prima observed, adjusting his fire pattern to lead Kale's movement. Humans always flee when faced with superior firepower. We're not fleeing, Kale panted, rolling behind a gravity anchor point as more plasma seared past his head. We're repositioning. The enhanced soldier's laugh held no warmth. Euphemisms will not save your species. Vex Prima triggered both weapons simultaneously, filling the sphere with crossfire that should have turned Kale into ionized particles. Instead, the human had calculated the firing patterns, found the microsecond gaps between energy bursts, and was moving through them like he was dancing between raindrops. It should have been impossible. The hegemony's computers had run every simulation, analyzed every human combat recording. Their bio-enhanced champion was faster, stronger, more accurate than any baseline human could be. But Kale wasn't fighting like any human they'd studied. He was fighting like all of them. Every move carried the accumulated experience of humanities. Warriors the patience of snipers, the brutality of berserkers, the cunning of assassins, the endurance of survivors. 300 years of galactic warfare had taught humanity to fight every possible enemy. In every conceivable circumstance, Kale reached the sphere's apex. Where the gravity generators created a null zone, he pushed off with precisely calculated force, hurtling toward Vex Prima in a ballistic trajectory that carried him through the gap between firing solutions. The enhanced soldier tried to track him, but Kale was moving too fast, changing vector by bouncing off gravity anchor points, like some impossible game of three-dimensional billiards. Vex Prima's enhanced reflexes became a liability. He was so focused on predicting Kale's next position that he couldn't react to where the human actually was. Kale slammed into Vex Prima feet first, driving both heels into the soldier's solar plexus with enough force to crack ribs even through military-grade armor. They crashed into the sphere's lower hemisphere, gravitational orientation shifting as they rolled across the curved surface. Vex Prima lost his grip on one rifle, but reversed his grip on the other and drove the weapon stock toward Kale's skull. The human caught it inches from his face, twisted, and used the soldier's enhanced strength against him, redirecting the strike into the arena floor. With enough force to shatter the weapon's power cell, the plasma rifle died with an electrical wheeze. Impossible, Vex Prima snarled, his perfect composure finally cracking. The calculations clearly indicated. Kale's fist smashed into his jaw, cutting off the analysis. Your mistake was thinking we fight by your rules. The enhanced soldier's genetic modifications kicked in, flooding his system with combat stimulants and pain suppressors. He caught Kale's next punch, squeezed until bones began to grind, and lifted the human off his feet. Superior strength. Vex Prima stated clinically, superior speed, superior endurance. The hegemony's science is. Kale headbutted him in the nose with enough force to see stars himself. As Vex Prima staggered back, Kale grabbed the fistfuls of the soldier's armor and used him as a pivot point, swinging around to drive both knees into his kidney area with devastating precision. The enhanced soldier went down, his perfect genetics, no match for perfect application of leverage and kinetic energy. He tried to rise, managed to get to his knees, then collapsed as his nervous system finally admitted defeat. How? Vex Prima gasped through a mouthful of blood. The mathematics were perfect. Math doesn't account for crazy, Kale replied, extending a hand to help his fallen opponent stand. And humans wrote the book on fighting dirty. Vex Prima stared at the offered hand for a long moment, then accepted it. Your species is more formidable than our projections indicated. The crowd was no longer cheering. A hushed tension had fallen over the arena as the implications began to sink in. The human hadn't just won the trials, he made it look easy against opponents that should have destroyed him. Third trial, the arbitrator announced, its mechanical voice carrying undertones of what might have been uncertainty. Choose your opponent, human. Kale looked up at the remaining 7 champions. The void dancer was no longer flickering with amusement. The reality bender had stopped its casual manipulation of local space-time. Even the collective's high-mind avatar seemed to be recalculating possibilities. They were beginning to understand what humanity had learned long ago. Sometimes, the most dangerous opponent isn't the strongest or the smartest. Sometimes it's the one with nothing left to lose. The void dancers, Kale announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. Let's see how well shadow fights substance. The dancer's champion stepped forward, its form shifting between visible and invisible spectrums like smoke, given malevolent purpose. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Bold choice, flesh creature. I am whisper of endings, and I have never known defeat. The arena began to shift again, reality becoming fluid as the void dancer's technology took hold. Light became optional, physics became suggestion. And the very concept of here and there began to lose meaning. Kale smiled grimly and cracked his knuckles. Good thing humans specialize in impossible. The arena transformed into a nightmare of shifting dimensions, where shadows had weight and light bent at unnatural angles. Whisper of endings moved through the altered space like a living concept of death, flickering between states of existence while reality warped around it. Kale found himself fighting in a space where up was sometimes down, where his own shadow occasionally detached to strike at him, and where the Void Dancer could phase through matter at will. Traditional combat was impossible here. Physics itself had become a weapon against him. Whisper of endings struck from 12 directions simultaneously, its form splitting into fractal geometries of violence. Each shadow limb carried the kinetic force of a pile driver, and they moved with the fluid grace of creatures born in the spaces between stars. Kale took the first 3 hits, letting them teach him the rhythm of this impossible space. Pain exploded through his ribs as shadow fists with the weight of real matter drove him to his knees. Blood ran from his mouth as he gasped for air that tasted of void and endings. You cannot fight what you cannot touch, Whisper of Endings observed, its voice echoing from dimensions that hurt to perceive. Your flesh is crude matter. I am refined absence. Maybe, Kale wheezed, struggling to his feet as the arena's gravity shifted again, but crude matter has one advantage over refined absence. The Void Dancer's next attack came from above and below, simultaneous shadow spears that should have impaled him from impossible angles. Instead, Kale did something that made the watching crowd gasp in horror. He stopped trying to dodge. The shadow spears pierced him through the shoulder and thigh, pinning him in place as Whisper of Endings materialized fully for the killing blow. The dancer's true form was beautiful and terrible, a humanoid shape carved from crystallized darkness, its eyes like dying stars. Fascinating, it said, raising one perfect shadow blade. You embrace your death. Perhaps humans possess more wisdom than... Kale's hand closed around the shadow spear in his shoulder. His grip was solid, real, anchored in baseline physics that even the Void Dancers couldn't completely overcome, where human flesh met shadow matter. Reality reasserted itself in a sphere of absolute normal space. Whisper of Endings tried to phase away, but found itself trapped within the expanding bubble of enforced physics. The shadow blade at Kale's throat suddenly had mass, weight, momentum that could be predicted and countered. The thing about humans, Kale grunted, twisting the shadow spear until it snapped, is that we're really good at making impossible situations normal. He lunged forward before the dancer could adapt, tackling it to what was now definitely the floor in a space that definitely followed conventional physics. They rolled across solid ground while the arena's dimensional distortions flickered and died, reality spreading outward from their point of contact like ripples in a pond. Whisper of Endings fought with desperate grace, its crystalline form shifting through combat stances from a dozen different martial traditions. But it was designed for asymmetric warfare, for striking from impossible angles in spaces where physics were optional. In a straightforward grappling match on solid ground, it was just another opponent. Kale's combat training took over military discipline honed by centuries of galactic warfare. He broke the dancer's wrist, rolled it into a submission hold, and applied pressure until something important cracked in its crystalline structure. Yield, he ordered, maintaining the hold as the last of the arena's dimensional distortions faded away. I cannot, Whisper of Endings gasped, its voice now coming from one location like any normal creature. The Void Dancers do not know surrender. Then learn, Kale replied grimly, increasing the pressure until the dancer's form began to fracture. Because the alternative is death, and dead champions can't protect their people. For a long moment, the only sound in the arena was the soft crackling of crystalline shadow under stress. Then Whisper of Endings spoke a single word in its native tongue, a concept that had never existed in their language until this moment. Yield. The crowd's reaction was deafening, but underneath the roar was something new, a quality of shock that bordered on religious awe. The human hadn't just defeated 3 champions. He forced the Void Dancer to invent the concept of surrender. The remaining 6 champions were no longer observing with detached interest. They were studying Kale like prey animals studying an apex predator, looking for weaknesses, patterns, anything that might keep their civilizations from sharing the dancer's humiliation. 4th trial, the arbitrator announced, and for the first time its mechanical voice carried what might have been uncertainty. Choose your opponent, human. Kale stood slowly, favoring his wounded leg, but refusing to show weakness. Blood still ran from the shadow spear wounds, but his eyes were bright with a terrible purpose. He looked up at the 6 remaining champions and smiled. "The collective," he announced. "Let's see how an individual fights a hive mind." The collective's avatar stepped forward, a shimmering humanoid composed of millions of microscopic entities, each one a complete organism connected to the vast network of their civilization. When it spoke, its voice was the harmony of a billion minds thinking as one. "We are intrigued by your victories, lone human. We have analyzed your tactics and adapted our strategies accordingly. You will find us different from your previous opponents." The arena began to shift yet again. Nanomachines constructing a perfect cube filled with floating platforms and energy barriers. It was designed to showcase the collective's ability to be everywhere at once, fighting on multiple fronts. With perfect coordination, Kale wiped blood from his mouth and nodded grimly. "Good. I was getting bored." The horn sounded for the 4th trial, and for the first time since entering the arena, Kale felt the cold touch of genuine uncertainty. The collective didn't just fight, it adapted in real time, learning from every exchange, becoming more perfect with each second of combat, and he was running out of tricks. The collective's avatar didn't attack, it divided. The shimmering humanoid form split into dozens of smaller entities, each one moving with the coordinated precision of a single mind distributed across multiple bodies. They flowed across the arena's floating platforms like living mercury, surrounding Kale from every possible angle while maintaining perfect tactical coordination. "We have studied your previous encounters." The collective voice spoke from all directions simultaneously, pattern recognition complete, adaptation initiated. The first wave struck from 8 directions at once. Unlike previous opponents, who fought as individuals, each collective entity moved in perfect harmony, with all others feigning high while striking low, creating openings that were instantly exploited by adjacent units, flowing like water around his defenses. Kale managed to dodge the first barrage, but the second caught him across the ribs, sending him stumbling toward the edge of his platform. A third wave was already incoming before he could recover. Dozens of collective entities converging on his position with mathematical precision. He leaped between platforms, using the arena's 3-dimensional layout to create temporary choke points where fewer enemies could engage him simultaneously. But the collective adapted instantly, their entities reorganizing to cut off his escape routes while maintaining constant pressure from all sides. "Tactical pattern recognized," the unified voice announced. Counter strategies implemented. The platforms began moving, shifting position under the collective's influence while energy barriers redirected Kale's movement into predetermined killing zones. What had started as environmental advantages became traps as the hive mind turned the entire arena into a weapon against him. Kale took a devastating combination of strikes to his torso, each one perfectly calculated to maximize damage while setting up the next attack. He rolled with the impacts, managed to grab one collective entity and used it as a shield against its companions, but the others simply flowed around their captured member without hesitation. The hive mind felt no attachment to individual components. Blood ran freely from a dozen wounds as Kale found himself pressed back against an energy barrier. Collective entities closing in from all sides. They moved with the fluid precision of a single organism, every action coordinated with every other action in a display of tactical perfection that no individual could match. "Surrender would be logical," the collective voice observed. Continued. "Resistance serves no strategic purpose." Kale spat blood and grinned. "Logic's overrated." He did something that violated every tactical principle he'd ever learned. Instead of trying to fight his way out of the encirclement, he dove deeper into it, straight into the center of the collective formation, where their perfect coordination became a liability. The entities were too close together to strike without hitting each other. For half a second, their flawless tactical harmony was disrupted by the simple problem of friendly fire. Half a second was enough. Kale caught the entities in a double submission hold, twisted until their crystalline structures cracked, then used their bodies as weapons against their companions. The collective tried to adapt, but adaptation required data, and Kale was providing information faster than even the hive mind could process. He fought like a man possessed, trading injury for injury while staying too close for the collective to use their numerical advantage effectively. When one entity fell, he grabbed another. When that one shattered, he picked up the pieces and used them as improvised weapons. The battle became a grinding war of attrition. Kale's human endurance pitted against the collective's ability to regenerate damaged units, platform by platform. They fought across the arena while the crowd watched in horrified fascination. But something was changing in the collective's responses. Their perfect coordination was becoming slightly less perfect, their adaptations taking microseconds longer. The hive mind was learning Kale's tactics, but the process was overwhelming their shared consciousness with contradictory data. Humans, it turned out, were too chaotic for perfect analysis. Error, the collective voice said, and for the first time it sounded confused. Pattern recognition, difficult. Subject refuses to maintain consistent behavioral parameters. Kale laughed through a mouthful of blood. That's because humans don't have parameters. He grabbed the last functional entity, lifted it overhead, and slammed it down onto the energy barrier below. The impact shattered both the collective unit and the barrier itself, sending cascades of feedback through the arena's systems. The collective's avatar began to reform, its scattered entities flowing back together into a single mass. But the hive mind was struggling now, its unified consciousness fragmented by too much contradictory combat data. We require coordination protocol restart. The voice stammered, no longer speaking in perfect unison. Kale didn't give them time to recover. He launched himself at the reforming avatar, driving both fists into its center mass before it could fully solidify. The impact scattered collective entities across 3 platforms, their shared consciousness finally overloading from processing too many individual combat scenarios simultaneously. One by one, the scattered entities went dormant, their connection to the hive mind severed by systemic feedback overload. Silence fell over the arena like a shroud. We yield, the collective voice whispered from the few remaining active entities. Individual combat parameters incompatible with shared consciousness matrix. Adaptation impossible. The crowd's reaction was beyond deafening. It was a sound that transcended species, a universal recognition that something fundamental had just changed in the galactic order. 5 champions defeated, 4 remaining, and the human was still standing. The arena had become a charnel house. Blood human, Krageth, synthetic, and substances that had no name in any language painted the nano-constructed surfaces in abstract patterns of violence. Kale stood in the center of it all, swaying slightly, but still upright, his body a map of wounds that should have killed him 3 battles ago. The remaining 4 champions watched him, with something approaching religious awe. The Solaran's energy being flickered with uncharacteristic uncertainty. The Deep Watch gravity manipulator had ceased its casual distortion of local space-time. The Nether Court's reality bender held itself perfectly still. The Axiom's living weapon, a creature bred for no purpose except killing, actually took a step backward. 5th trial, the arbitrator announced, but his voice carried undertones that suggested even ancient machine intelligence could be surprised. Choose your opponent, human. Kale looked up at them, his eyes still bright despite the blood loss and exhaustion. His smile held no warmth, only the terrible promise of someone who had absolutely nothing left to lose. All 4, he said quietly. The arena fell silent, even the quantum harmonics of a billion spectators across 9 star systems went quiet as the implication sank in. That is not, the arbitrator began. Check your records, Kale interrupted, his voice carrying despite its hoarseness. The right of dominion allows the challenger to dictate terms if they've won more than half the required trials. I'm 545. The remaining champions can face me individually and definitely lose, or they can work together and maybe have a chance. The 4 champions exchanged glances that transcended species, a universal recognition of a predator evaluating prey. He's trying to force them into desperation, Vex Prima observed from where he sat in the medical section. His enhanced physiology, already healing from their earlier encounter, make them abandon their individual advantages for collective action. No, Whisper of Endings corrected, its crystalline form flickering with new understanding. He's offering them the only honorable path to defeat. The human knows he cannot win from more individual trials, so he creates a scenario where victory becomes possible again. Morthic's mandibles clicked with what might have been approval. He fights like Krageth when defeat is certain. Charge into the heart of the enemy. The collective's remaining entities hummed in harmonic agreement. Pattern recognition indicates subject prefers impossible odds to merely difficult ones. In the royal boxes, 9 civilizations' representatives leaned forward with sudden interest. If the human died here, the threat to galactic order died with him. If he won against 4 champions simultaneously, the Solaran champion stepped forward. First, its energy form blazing with the fury of a contained star. We accept these terms. The stakes are too high for individual pride. The others nodded agreement. The Deep Watch Manipulator, the Nethercourt Reality Bender, and the Axiom Living Weapon form in a line beside their solar companion. So be it, the arbitrator announced. Final trial for champions versus one human. Arena configuration, total war. The floor began to shift, creating a vast spherical space filled with floating debris, energy barriers, gravity wells, and dimensional rifts. It was every possible combat environment combined into one nightmare landscape. Where any form of warfare was possible, weapon racks rose from every surface, displaying implements of destruction from across the galaxy. The four champions moved to arm themselves: plasma cannons, gravity hammers, reality anchors. Stellar cores contained in portable housings. Kale walked to the nearest weapon rack and picked up a simple metal bar. That's it, the Axiom weapon growled, its form shifting between predatory configurations. Metal against energy, flesh against physics. It's not about the weapon, Kale replied, testing the bar's weight and balance. It's about the person using it. The horn sounded, for champions struck simultaneously from different directions, their combined assault designed to overwhelm any possible defense. The Solaron blazed with nuclear fire. The Deep Watch warped gravity into crushing waves. The Nethercourt twisted reality into impossible geometries, and the Axiom weapon became a living storm of calculated destruction. Kale moved between their attacks like he was dancing, using the metal bar to redirect energy, deflect gravity waves, and anchor himself to baseline reality. Where their powers intersected, he was there, turning their coordination against them by occupying the spaces where they couldn't strike without hitting each other. The battle raged across the spherical arena, debris and bodies flying through altered physics while the crowd watched in stunned silence. Kale took devastating hits: burns from stellar fire, crushing force from manipulated gravity, reality displacement that left him existing in 3 dimensions simultaneously. But he kept moving, kept fighting, kept finding ways to turn their advantages into vulnerabilities. The turning point came when the Deep Watch Manipulator created a gravity well designed to trap him. Instead of fighting it, Kale used it as a slingshot, launching himself at the Solaron champion with enough kinetic energy to disrupt its energy matrix. Solar Flame died to ember as the energy being collapsed, its coherence shattered by pure kinetic impact. 1 down. The remaining 3 pressed their attack with desperate fury. But something had changed in the battle's rhythm. Kale was no longer just surviving, he was winning. The Nethercourt Reality Bender fell next, its control over local physics shattered. When Kale used the metal bar to create a resonance frequency that disrupted dimensional manipulation, the creature's death scream echoed across 17 different planes of existence. Before cutting off abruptly dotted down, the Deep Watch Gravity Manipulator and the Axiom Living Weapon fought with the fury of the desperate, combining their abilities to create killing fields that should have been impossible to survive. Gravity waves strong enough to crush planets intersected with weapon forms that existed purely to end life. Kale survived by refusing to exist in any one location long enough for their attacks to find him. He moved through the chaos like smoke, striking when opportunities appeared, always keeping both opponents between him and their combined firepower. The Deep Watch champion made the mistake of getting too close. Try and create a localized gravity well that would trap the human in place. Kale caught the alien's manipulation organ, a specialized appendage that controlled gravitational fields, and twisted until something important broke. The gravity manipulator's scream was felt rather than heard as its connection to fundamental forces severed permanently. It collapsed, its body no longer able to function in normal gravity. 3 down. The Axiom Living Weapon stood alone in the center of the ruined arena, its form cycling through every predatory configuration in its genetic memory. It was beautiful and terrible evolution and engineering combined to create the perfect killer. "You cannot defeat me," it said, its voice carrying harmonics that triggered primal fear responses across a dozen species. "I am death given form. I am the ending of all stories." Kale looked up at it, standing amid the wreckage of 6 champions, bleeding from wounds that painted his body in abstract patterns of red. His smile was gentle, almost sad. "No," he said quietly, "you're just the monster someone else built. I'm the monster I chose to become." The final battle was brief and absolute. The Axiom weapon was designed to kill anything, but Kale had learned to kill everything. When perfect predator met perfect survivor, the outcome was inevitable. The living Weapon fell with a sound like breaking crystal, its perfect form finally still. Silence descended upon the arena like a funeral shroud. 100 billion spectators across 9 star systems held their breath as the implications crashed over them like a tidal wave of inevitability. Kale Vorthik stood alone in the center of the spherical battlefield, surrounded by the bodies of 9 champions who had never known defeat. Blood ran from a dozen wounds. His breathing came in ragged gasps, and his legs shook with exhaustion that threatened to topple him, but he was standing. "The trials are complete," the arbitrator announced, its ancient mechanical voice carrying undertones of something that might have been awe. "By right of combat, by ancient law, by victory absolute, the human claims dominion over 9 worlds." The crowd's reaction transcended sound, becoming something felt in the bones, in the quantum foam of space-time itself. It was the sound of an entire galactic order realizing it had just changed forever. In the royal boxes, 9 civilizations' representatives sat in stunned silence. The Kragith Empire's warlords clicked their mandibles in grudging respect. The hegemony's perfect soldiers ran probability calculations that kept returning impossible results. The void dancers flickered between dimensions of disbelief. The collective's high minds buzzed with a million conversations trying to process the unprocessable. Kale collapsed to his knees, finally allowing exhaustion to claim him. The metal bar fell from nerveless fingers, clattering against the arena floor with a sound that seemed to echo across the galaxy. "Why?" Morthic asked from the medical section, his voice carrying across the arena's acoustics. "Your species could have negotiated, taken contracts, earned respect over generations. Why risk everything on single combat?" Kale looked up at the fallen Kragith champion, his eyes still bright despite his body's rebellion, because earning respect and demanding it are different things. One takes forever and can be revoked at will. The other, he gestured weakly at the carnage around him, the other is permanent. Transport drones descended to carry away the fallen champions. Medical nanites already working to repair damage that would have been fatal to lesser beings. They would live, all of them. Kale had been precise in his violence, dealing exactly enough damage to secure victory without crossing the line into murder. Even in his moment of absolute triumph, he had shown mercy. "The crowns," the arbitrator announced, its voice now carrying formal ceremony. "By ancient law, the victor may claim the symbols of dominion over the defeated worlds." 9 crystalline crowns materialized on pedestals around the arena, each one containing the compressed authority of an entire galactic civilization. The Kragith Empire's crown pulsed with the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. The hegemonies gleamed with the perfection of absolute order. The others carried their own terrible significance. Kale struggled to his feet, refusing help from the medical drones. Step by agonizing step, he made his way to each pedestal, lifting each crown with hands that shook from exhaustion rather than awe. But as he held the 9th and final crown, the axiom symbol of engineered destruction, he did something that sent shockwaves through every watching consciousness. He set it back down. "I claim the right of dominion," he announced, his voice somehow carrying to every corner of the vast amphitheater. "But I do not claim the crowns." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. The arbitrator's form flickered with what might have been computational uncertainty. "Explain," the ancient machine demanded. Kale turned to face the royal boxes, his bloody form somehow commanding absolute attention from beings who ruled star systems. "Humanity doesn't want to rule 9 worlds," he said. "We want what we've always wanted, to be treated as equals, to have our contracts honored and our sovereignty respected, to be partners in this galaxy rather than useful tools." He gestured to the fallen champions, now being attended by medical teams. These beings fought with honor. Their worlds deserve to be ruled by those who understand them, not by conquerors who won them in combat. So I make a different choice. Kale picked up the metal bar again, using it as a walking stick as he approached the central platform. "I claim the right of negotiation instead of the right of dominion. Let humanity's representative sit at the Galactic Council, not as ruler of 9 worlds, but as an equal voice among 10 civilizations." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, Morthic began to click his mandibles in what the crowd recognized as Kragith applause. Vex Prima joined in with the rhythmic precision of hegemony approval. One by one, the fallen champions added their voices to something that had never existed before in Galactic history. The losers were applauding the victor's mercy. "The right of negotiation is accepted," the arbitrator announced, its mechanical voice carrying what might have been approval, Let it be recorded that on this day, humanity earned not dominion through conquest, but partnership through honor. As medical teams finally reached him, as the arena began to empty and the crowd dispersed to carry news of this impossible day, across the galaxy, Kale allowed himself one small smile. He had entered the arena alone, representing a species that was feared but never respected. He was leaving as humanity's first galactic ambassador, having transformed hired killers into partners, through the simple expedient of proving that sometimes the strongest choice is knowing when not to use your strength. In the days that followed, as humanity took its place at the Galactic Council, children across 9 worlds would hear the story of the human who won 9 crowns and gave them all away. And they would learn that sometimes the greatest victory is the one you choose not to claim. The age of humanity as mere mercenaries was over. The age of humanity as galactic citizens had begun. And it all started with one man who entered an arena alone and left with something more valuable than any crown, the respect of the galaxy itself.